If I asked you the question, what is man's greatest invention, what would you say? There's a lot of strong contenders. Some might say fire, because it gave us warmth, safety, and the ability to cook. Others might point to the wheel, because it opened the door to movement, to trade, to civilization itself. But there's one invention most people forget. One that quietly changed everything. Money. Unlike the wheel or fire, money isn't something you can touch or see in its truest form. Because money is an illusion. It's not a tool or a gadget. It's not made of wood or metal. It's a concept, a belief, a story we all agree to tell ourselves. Its value doesn't come from what it is, but from what we say it is. And yet, this illusion has shaped the world more than almost any other invention in human history. Before we had money, we had barter. People trading goods and services directly, one thing for another. If I raised cattle and you grew vegetables, maybe I'd give you a cow in exchange for enough food to feed my family. If I made tents and you crafted shoes, I might trade you a shelter for something to cover my feet. Already, you can see the problem. This system was wildly inefficient. It only worked when two people needed exactly what the other had at exactly the same time. Economists call this the double coincidence of wants. Without it, no trade, no deal, no value. And even when trades did happen, they were often unbalanced. A tent for a pair of shoes? One person always walked away with more. But money didn't just solve the problem of fair exchange. It solved another, even deeper problem. Storage of value. Think of the tomato farmer. He can grow and trade all he wants, but tomatoes spoil. They rot. He can't save up his wealth, can't carry it into the future. But a tent maker? He can build a dozen tents and trade them throughout the year. His wealth lasts. His effort compounds. Two people putting in equal work, but one can store that work and the other can't. Before money, survival depended not just on how hard you worked, but on what you produced and whether it could last. And there was another problem too, specialization. Today, we're told to find a niche. But in the old world, that could be a death sentence. Because if only a few people wanted what you had, your skill didn't matter. You couldn't trade. You couldn't survive. Only the people holding what everyone wanted, things like salt, weapons, and animal skins, held true power. And soon, people started collecting those items, even if they didn't need them, just to have something to trade, just to have leverage. This was the birth of commodity money. Arbitrary objects, like salt or beads, became placeholders for value. An IOU, a bridge between trade partners. And this changed everything. Instead of trading for something you might not need, you could trade for a token, an object that held agreed-upon value. And later, you could use that token to get what you wanted. It was genius. And over time, it spread across civilizations. Slowly, surely, the world shifted from barter to money. But the idea still had one flaw. Scarcity. For anything to hold value, it needs to be scarce. That's economics 101. If everyone has it, it's worthless. And money, no matter what form it takes, only works if not everyone can get it. It can't be worth that much, right? That was the problem. If something's easy to find, like sand or seashells you can pick up from any beach, then it's not really scarce. And if it's not scarce, it's not valuable. So over time, we evolved. Around 770 BC, the first metal coins were introduced in China. As a kind of homage to their barter history, they crafted miniature versions of the tools they used to trade, tiny shovels, knives, and spades, until they eventually settled on circular shapes. Easy to carry, safe to handle. Cast in bronze. And for the first time, money wasn't just an idea. It was a thing. Something real. Something valuable. You couldn't just scoop bronze from the sand. In those days, money wasn't yet an illusion. The value of a coin was the metal it contained. A gold coin weighing 1 gram was worth exactly 1 gram of gold. You could see it, measure it, feel it. But kings saw an opportunity. They realized the more of these precious metals they controlled, the more power they held. So in 600 BC, Aliats, the king of Lydia, created the first official mint. Coins were no longer just hunks of metal. They were designed, stamped, and given official denominations. One glance told you what a coin was worth, not because of its weight, but because of the image on its face. And that's where things started to shift. Kings wanted more coins, but precious metals were costly, so they got creative. They began mixing the gold and silver with cheaper materials. They slimmed the coins down, diluted their content, but kept the same stamp, the same value. And so, the illusion of money was born. It no longer mattered what the coin was made of. What mattered was what the government, or the ruler, said it was worth. Take the British pound sterling. At one point, it literally meant a pound of sterling silver. But soon, that was just a name. The physical silver no longer backed the currency. When global trade began to stretch across continents, metal coins became too heavy, too impractical. So kings introduced something new, the IOU. Paper notes, stamped with royal seals, promising that the bearer could redeem them for real coins later. And people believed them, trusted them, used them, until one day, no one really cared about redeeming the paper anymore. The paper itself had become money. We didn't need the metal. We had belief. And that belief is what carries the entire modern financial system today. From ancient kings to today's central banks, money remains an illusion. A story, a placeholder of power, made real only because we all agree it's real. Take this, for example. The most valuable banknote in circulation right now is the 10,000 Singapore dollar note. One single slip of paper worth over 7,000 US dollars. It's still legal tender. You can buy a car with it, or a pile of gold. And yet, the paper itself? It costs less than 20 cents to produce. But through the magic, or manipulation, of fiat currency, it holds the value of 120 grams of gold. Fiat, a Latin word that means let it be done. That's exactly what money is today. A decree, a command from a government, declaring what a currency is worth and enforcing that it must be accepted. And here's the thing. Just like the rulers of old, modern governments know the power that comes from creating more money. They understand that whoever holds the purse strings holds the influence. So what happens when a government wants more money? They just make more. If the United States wants $340 million to buy another fighter jet, they don't need to earn it. They can simply print it. But that doesn't come without consequences. Because money only has value if it can be used to exchange for things, goods and services that are real. So, when you flood the market with more money than there are goods to buy, the prices rise. And when prices rise, the value of each dollar falls. That's inflation. And that's where the illusion starts to stretch thin. And this is exactly why so many economists, and even everyday people like you and me, are growing more anxious about the global reserve currency, the United States dollar. 2020 changed everything. The world came to a halt. Streets once full of life fell silent. Economies froze. Stores shuttered. Jobs disappeared. And the goods and services we once took for granted slowed to a trickle. To stop the world from completely falling apart, the U.S. government did something unprecedented. They began printing money. Not just a little, a lot. In fact, right now, over 40% of all U.S. dollars in existence today were printed in just the last 18 months. Let that sink in. It's staggering, unimaginable. And for an economy whose actual output hasn't increased by nearly that much, it's dangerous. Because eventually, the prices of everything begin to rise. Slowly at first, almost invisibly. A few cents here, a couple dollars there. You may have already seen it. The price of lumber nearly tripled in just a year. That guac at Chipotle. Yeah, it's up 20 cents. Small changes, quietly unfolding beneath your feet. And while those stimulus and unemployment checks might have felt like relief, and for many, they were, it's a double-edged sword. It helps those who need it most. Absolutely. But at the same time, it chips away at the very foundation of how our economy works. Jobs are harder to come by. Or worse, they're no longer worth it. In the U.S., for example, restaurant workers, servers, waitstaff, are legally allowed to be paid as little as $2 to $3 an hour. The rest of their income comes from tips. But with fewer people going out and customers spending less, those tips, they dry up. No tips, no income. And when you're earning more from unemployment checks than working a job, the incentive disappears. Why clock in when staying home pays more? That's the domino effect. Businesses can't find workers. Workers can't make enough. And the economy begins to spiral. But it all leads back to something deeper, something quieter, something we don't often see. The Federal Reserve. It's the government's secret weapon for creating money out of thin air and pumping it into the system without many people noticing. Before 2020, the United States was already $29 trillion in debt. That's not a typo. Trillion. With AT, this debt is made up of bonds and treasury notes, pieces of paper that promise a return with interest. A 10-year treasury bond right now pays about 1.23%. That means if you invest $1,000 today, you'll make just $12.30 over a decade. And here's the kicker. That return doesn't even keep up with inflation. You're actually losing buying power. So even investing in your own government's bonds backed by your own currency, guarantees a slow bleed. And yet, banks, businesses, even foreign governments still buy them. Because in theory, the US will always pay them back. But how? Well, here's the uncomfortable truth. When it's time to pay that debt, the money's already been spent. So what do? They just print more. The Federal Reserve buys back those bonds from major financial institutions and pays for them with new money created out of thin air. Since March 2020, over $1 trillion in bonds have been bought back this way, and they're still doing it. And with this new influx of money, banks can now lend more, offer more credit, fuel more spending, grow the economy.